Okay, so now comes the popcorn. All right, now I've seen many people use barley or sand like they used to back in the old days. I use popcorn kernels. I've heard of other people using popcorn kernels. So here's what I do. I use my little dowel to kind of start stretching out the Costrel so that I can start kind of cramming popcorn in there. Now, I don't have any molds, though I might start using some molds in the future. I've never done that before or taken the time to build a mold. So I just use popcorn kernels in order to get the shape, which is, I think, kind of cool because you can get some really interesting shapes. I kind of like how natural it looks sometimes. It's not going to be perfect sometimes. Asymmetrical a little. I don't care. It's fine. It's character, right? Okay, so the trick with this is you want to start with just a little bit of popcorn in there. You might make a huge mess as it pops out. You pull off the funnel and it just goes everywhere. Okay, it happens. Okay, you want to get some popcorn kernels in there. And then what you're going to do is you're basically just going to start cramming them in there with a little dowel, okay? Now, this is kind of the important part when you start at the beginning. With something like this shape, it's actually pretty easy. But if you get into some complex shapes, you really want to make sure that you take the time to watch as it stretches, okay? So we keep adding a little bit more popcorn here, and we're going to start seeing that it takes shape. Okay, now I've crammed quite a bit of popcorn in here, and one thing you can notice here is that it's twisting a little bit, okay? That's fine because it's still pliable. So you really want to start working it, looking at it, because leather, at least in my opinion, and I'm not a professional here, but what I have discovered is that, you know, leather is going to stretch differently from one corner to the next. 1 inch of leather will stretch this way, and then 3 inches over, it stretches a little bit differently, okay? I'm not looking for perfection here, but I'm going to get it as close to symmetrical as possible. So you just have to kind of cram stuff in there and play with it a little bit. I'm taking a board here to kind of flatten it out, and then I stuck the cork in there, right? So I crammed the cork in there so that it's going to be able to wet form to that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to let it dry a little bit. Okay? You can mold it right now, but as soon as you let it dry, it's going to be it. Okay. So now that we've let it dry overnight for 24 hours, we're going to take all the popcorn back out. Sometimes it'll shake out and then you're good to go. Sometimes you have to give it a little bit of prying to get it to go and pop out of there. There we go. Yes, I know I keep saying pop. I'm saying it on purpose. Okay, you can still have kernels stuck in there, so take some time to make sure with a flashlight or something to rake around in there that you don't have any kernels stuck in there. Just a tip, I have seen someone where they've taken some bolts, some little tiny bolts, and just dropped in there and shaken that around, and that also helps to make sure that it's cleared of any of your kernels or barley or whatever it is that you have in there. I've never done sand. I feel like that would just kind of stay in there. I don't know. Okay, so now that we're done with that, here comes the tricky part. We want to use beeswax in order to seal that, and I start my oven at 170. I start at 170 because not all ovens, even though it says 170, are going to be at 170. They're going to be variable. You don't want to get this over, I believe I read somewhere around 200. So I don't get my leather any higher than that, nor do I get my beeswax higher than that. Okay, so you want to make sure that your leather is nice and hot. It's going to be very, very warm because you are going to pour hot beeswax inside of that. Okay? If beeswax touches something that's cold, it's going to solidify. We don't want that. All right, so here's where I start. Get my nice little spoon there, and I start just basically funneling beeswax in there. Now, I do recommend that you get really good beeswax. I bought this locally from an apiary, so make sure you get the good stuff. All right, so you want to get plenty of this beeswax in there, a couple of scoops, shake it around. Now, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to make sure that that wax is all over the interior of that Costrel. Okay. I don't want to leave a lot of excess in there either. So I'm kind of pouring it out, and as I'm pouring it, I'm spinning it so that it's also coating where the cork goes. Okay, it's coating the mouthpiece. All right, cool. Looks good. Now, we're going to put it back in the oven. I feel like this is a cooking show. And put it back in the oven and take it out. All right. I'm putting more in it. Doing the exact same thing. And I'm going to repeat this process until I notice that the beeswax starts permeating and showing on the outside. Okay, now one other thing I recommend is whenever you're placing this inside and pulling it out and back, flip it, okay? Now this is what I'm looking for. Whenever I see that the outside is starting to be shiny, what that tells me is the beeswax has been absorbed from the inside to the outside. So I know that it's permeated through that leather, and I'm just going to keep adding a little bit more to it, okay? Because what I want to do now is make sure that the inside of that Costrel is coated really well, particularly the seams. You want to make sure that the seams are nice and coated. Once I'm happy with that, I'll then come and coat the outside with my nice little paintbrush. Make sure that it's all even on the outside and that the outside seams are also absorbing that. And then I'll come in with the paper towel while it's still hot and basically just kind of polish it up a little bit. That also helps to kind of even everything out, make it look nice and pretty. And a little bit more on the inside, right? You can't have too many. So now what we're doing is we're making sure that the cork is going to be watertight. So by putting that in, I'm able to make sure that beeswax is coating right around the seams where the cork is going to be located. Now, you can get a huge wax buildup here by doing this. So you are going to have to go in and clear that out. And that's what I'm doing with this little bitty skewer here. Is there's a lot of buildup of wax that I at the bottom of the cork. I don't need it there. It's fine. And I just basically scrape that out. And that's about it. The rest of it is basically cleanup. Here, I'm just making sure that all the seams are sealed. One of the ways to do this is keep doing this, and all of the beeswax will start to solidify right along those seams. Okay, so one thing you should try is whenever you're done and everything's cooled off and dried for maybe a day, add water. See if you get any leaks. If you do, pour it out, let it dry for another day, and then just do this process over and make sure that the beeswax is on those seams. And that's it. That's how I make my little Costrels. There we go. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Definitely get into some of the forums and boards because there's so many ways to make these. Thanks, guys.